Hey folks, what makes this toy great? Today we're looking at something exceedingly rare. It's a complete collection of the 1985 St. Louis Test Market Happy Meal Transformers toys. And if you live outside the US, you may never have heard of these, much less own one. If you live inside of the US, you may never have heard of these, much less own one. They were available for a very limited amount of time and in a very limited geographical region. So, as the story goes, McDonald's ran this test in St. Louis, Missouri. And there were two flavors of toys. There were Transformers for the boys, My Little Pony for the girls. But because the Transformers figurines didn't transform, they may not have been very popular with the kids, and this test did not proceed to a nationwide rollout. At least that's the way the story goes. Transformers collectors have been repeating this story for at least 25 years since the early days of the Usenet news groups, but there's actually very, very little evidence. What we do know is that there are collectors who have reported acquiring these toys as a child who did not live in St. Louis. So they lived in other parts of Missouri. They lived in Illinois. I've heard from a collector who got one as far south as Memphis, Tennessee. And I suspect what's happening here is that the apocryphal story is rooted in truth. It's just missing some details. And I'm no expert on McDonald's structure back in 1985, but I think what was likely happening is that there was a regional management and distribution model covering franchises throughout Missouri, maybe centered in St. Louis, and also covering adjacent markets, which may have been part of Illinois, for example, even though the corporate headquarters of McDonald's was near Chicago. And diving into the toys, there were four character molds available. Each was released in one of six color combinations, which makes for a total of 24 toys to collect. And you'll notice from the picture on screen that Bumblebee and Cliffjumper actually share the same menu of color combinations, and then Gears and Brawn also share the same menu of color combinations. So let's take a closer look at Brawn to start. And right away, you can tell that he's based on the toy model. The hook arms are a little simplified, maybe for the better, but his face is actually a very close representation of the toy. I'd say it's quite accurate. His chest is pretty good. He's got his stilt legs, and even on the top, up where his head is, you can see the grill of his Jeep mode. And he's still got tires on his legs, but once you flip him over and look at his back, it pretty much all falls apart. You can see there's no detail there at all other than the 1985 Hasbro stamp. So you can imagine how a kid would get this toy in their Happy Meal and go, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And then switching over to Gears, you can see another faithful recreation of the toy model. He's got that face that completely diverges from the cartoon model. His chest has a little bit of detail. And then in this creepy turn of events, he's got molded fingers. And now, having recovered from that jump scare, we can appreciate that they at least acknowledged his transformation in the position of the tires. But there's almost no detail at all on the top of his head to represent the front grille of the truck. You can also see on the back how these toys are held together. It's actually melted together. And moving on to Cliff Jumper, he's another faithful recreation of the toy mold. But he's also an interesting example of a color variation that happened. Even though this was a very short production run, there was some variation in the way the paint was mixed into the plastic. So many of the blue bodied toys would come out more of a cyan or a teal. The red bodied toys you can find in slightly darker red shades. And the purple can also be a lighter or a darker shade of purple. These are not intentional seventh or eighth color combinations, but they're distinct enough that really dedicated collectors will seek them. And getting up close on Cliff Jumper, his face is pretty good, except the horns are a little small. His feet have a decent amount of detail, vaguely evoking that Porsche front end that he's supposed to have from the toy. Legs have a little bit of deco, and then when you turn him over, you can again see that melt rivet technique that holds him together. And the final mold is Bumblebee. And Bumblebee's going to help me show you something that I think is really interesting. And actually, for me personally, it's what makes this toy great. Of course, he's got all the molding details. Again, a pretty faithful recreation of the toy face, feet, wheels. But I'm going to compare him now to a G1 Bumblebee. So, of course, you can see right away that this figurine is a little bit shorter, but that's not what's interesting. Look at the chest, okay? This G1 Bumblebee on the right is not a regular G1 Bumblebee. It's actually a very special thing. It's the Estrela Volks that was released in Brazil during G1. So it's an authentic G1 Bumblebee. But something that was different about the Estrelas is that sticker on their chest. Instead of an Autobot symbol or later the rub symbol, this was the micro change sticker, the sticker that was on the pre Transformer Bumblebee. But now look at the figurine of the Happy Meal Transformer and notice that its chest decorations are based on the micro change, not an Autobot symbol. So, what makes this toy great? Well, I love the folklore of the origin story, the St. Louis test market, that I'm sure is rooted in truth, but there are probably a lot of details that we'll never fill in. I also love that it's such an obscure niche that a objectively terrible toy years and years later could become beloved by a subset of the fan community, while so many of us still have never even heard of these and couldn't care less. And then my personal favorite characteristic is this deep connection to the pre Transformers micro change history. That sticker being carried over onto a 1985 toy long after the Autobot symbol and even the rub signs had become established. And I'll add a little personal note that Bumblebee, both Bumblebees actually that we showcased, the black and yellow Happy Meal figurine, as well as the Estrella G1 Bumblebee, are both my childhood toys. So I did acquire one of these Happy Meal toys as a child. I had an uncle in St. Louis, and we would visit him on road trips. And so that is my personal explanation for how I acquired one of these as a child, although I don't actually remember getting it in hand, when it happened. And if you enjoy Transformers history and trivia or even repair techniques, we cover a lot of those topics on the channel. So take a look at some of the other videos. Tell me if you had one of these as a child, and especially if you got one outside of the city of St. Louis. I'd love to hear about it. Say hi in the comments. I hope you found this information useful, and we'll see you next time.